Welcome to this A Greener Life, Greener World live hangout, where we'll be discussing the impact of Donald Trump signaling to pull out from the Paris Agreement. So, Ben, if I just start with you, how are Friends of the Earth reacting to this announcement?
So, we're quite disappointed that Donald Trump has decided to remove the United States from the Paris Accord, and honestly, we see this as yet another piece of Donald Trump's larger agenda of climate denial and attacks on the environment. So it's not shocking, but I think it just reiterates that the United States is going in the wrong direction under Donald Trump, and our members and our activists are quite engaged in pushing not only against Donald Trump and the Trump administration, but also to try and get action out of cities, states, and other areas to show that the United States actually does want meaningful climate action.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Ultimately, we're an American NGO and we're a bunch of lawyers. And so I think, we tackle this on two ends. One end, I think, has been a complete resistance and trying to obstruct and resist and slow down the real climate assaults that he is having, that the Trump administration is completely having on this country. So within the first 100 days, he lifted the national coal moratorium. He rolled back the Clean Power Plan. He has opened up our oceans to drilling, and he has greenlit essentially the Dakota Access Pipeline and Keystone. And so all of these things are just an affirmative assault against what the Obama administration did do and what a lot of our organizations, our communities have been fighting for so long. So on the one end, we're just trying to use the wall to really stop that and try to resist. And on the other end, the fascinating part, I think, about all of this is, as Chris was saying, really the rise of the subnational actors at this point. This is the first time that a governor has gone directly to the president of China, right? I mean, this is just a supreme new world order in a way, so it's extremely interesting. But, before we give these folks, the hero mantle, I think it's super important to actually look at what they are saying and their commitments. We work especially in California to challenge the fact that California is the third largest oil producing state in this country, and people don't know that. And it's essential for if we're going to meet this 1.5 degree target to actually keep fossil fuels in the ground. So our job now is to keep pushing on state governments to actually really commit to climate action that's far more ambitious than Paris.
At IIED, we work with the 48 poorest countries, the least developed countries, and the US abdicating their responsibility for global cooperation on climate change is huge. It's really significant. It's making. I mean, this is an incredible moment in many ways. As you've all been saying, there's lots of opportunity. By Trump withdrawing from Paris, we've seen other countries that we wanted to see more ambition from, China, India, now Paris, all stepping up and saying they'll do more. So there is a movement that's been inspired by his withdrawal. But the US is the largest economy. It's a significant amount of emissions that they had committed to reduce, that they will no longer be seeking to reduce, and that makes vulnerable countries around the world at greater danger of irreversible climate impacts. So that it's not a small issue. But as others have also said, Trump is now isolated. We saw Tillerson going to New Zealand and having a very warm welcome with their middle fingers raised by New Zealanders. So their position globally has been affected, and that's right. It should be. But their contribution to the emissions, hopefully what the subnational states, what the businesses will do, will be enough to change the market so that we don't see the US continuing down a dirty, polluting path. But their contribution to climate finance was important for the poorest countries. The poorest countries now won't have as much finance, and it was never enough anyway. I mean, the 100 billion that got signed up to at Copenhagen, we've costed the NDCs, just of the LDC countries, the 48 poorest countries, and that's for 100 billion. So, you know, we never had enough finance in the first place, and that finance has been flowing to the better off countries, not the poorest countries. So the loss of the US finance is significant. But on the other hand, the fact that they're now damaged goods within the climate negotiations is another positive, because there was a great risk with Trump coming in that he would water down the rules of the Paris Agreement. And now we don't believe that he'll be able to. We don't believe the US will be as influential within the Paris negotiation of the rule book. So there's positive and minuses and negatives, as others have said. Contribution to the Green Climate Fund, the $2 billion that now the US government, federal government, I should say, to be clear, won't be giving to the Green Climate Fund. I don't know. Could businesses and the state governments fill the gap? That's possible. There was quite a lot of that. That was actually a relatively small part of the US finance. I mean, let's start by saying the US was never a very large contributor of climate finance. Per capita, it was very low. They, even by quantum, they were below most other bilateral, most of the other G7 countries. But having said that, not all of it flowed through the Green Climate Fund. Quite a lot of it flowed directly through bilateral programs in countries. And one of the things that was very special about US finance that none of the other bilaterals do was they had a commitment that 30% of their finance should go to local partners. And that was unusual. That was something different that nobody else does. So that, in some ways, the biggest loss is that in-country bilateral support to national partners, and to the, which was a way of building southern institutions and southern capabilities for climate action.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to come in on the legal side of things, on the climate finance bit?
So legally, the United States, cities and states can fill in the gaps, but I think practically, you know, we're talking about billions of dollars, and realistically, you know, other than sort of the largest states like California, there aren't a lot of governments that have the capacity to really fill in the void left by the United States, by the federal government, and so this is going to be a huge missing piece from the U.S. and I think, you know, taking a step back, we've talked a lot about finance, but you know, we need to understand that finance is the U.S.'s obligation to help the rest of the developing world actually develop on a sustainable trajectory, and not follow the pathway that we did. And so what we're talking about is not only the U.S. shirking their mitigation obligations and doing less from a lowering emissions standpoint, but they're also not helping the rest of the world develop on a sustainable trajectory as well. And so, you know, there's a lot of like, why should we be financing other countries here in the United States? And you know, there's been pushback about international aid, but this is actually about making sure that the poorer countries are actually able to develop in a sustainable pathway. And so that is, I think, and meet the type of reduction obligations that they've made. And so that is the biggest, I think, immediate impact that we're going to see from Paris.
Chris, Trump made this decision because he said he was going to stand up for the U.S. economy, and he's going to stand up for particularly the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris. And the mayor of Pittsburgh responded to us saying that actually we are moving our economy towards a clean tech economy. And how is he actually going to help business, or is it going to hurt business in the US, this move?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you saw such an overwhelming response from the business community in the United States and frankly around the world, particularly from multinational companies that are doing business both in the United States and around. But look, I mean, what you have seen with the collapse of coal as an energy source in the U.S., a transition to, you know, some natural gas and also renewables, is a result of market forces. It is a result of a drastic drop in the price of generating electricity from wind and solar. And withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement is not going to change that. I think this transition to a low carbon economy is going to happen. The question is it going to happen quick enough? I'm moderately optimistic that this will accelerate, but I think what's at risk for the United States is missing the economic growth that will accrue to the economies and countries that are leading on this. So in fact, it's just the opposite. You know, the Paris Climate Accord is not a job killer. Climate change is a job killer. And so I think what's at risk for the U.S. and that's why you have seen the almost unanimous voice of the business community calling on Trump both to remain within the agreement, but also to accelerate this transition, is because they understand that you know, solutions to climate change offer what is likely to be one of the best drivers of economic growth in the 21st century.
Gene, what was in this agreement that Trump was so scared about? Because from a legal point of view, there wasn't anything that the U.S. needed to commit to. It was all voluntary, right?
I mean, this thing, yeah, it was voluntary, and I think this was as much political as anything else. Other folks may have a point of view on this, but you know, let's be honest. The president is being buffeted by, you know, forces from all sides, and I think, you know, this was an opportunity to play to his base, and he made the decision, and you know, I think. It appears as though there wasn't a lot of thought put into this decision, to be honest.
Yeah, do you want to comment on that as well?
Why did he pull out? You know, well, I think, you know, the positive part about him pulling out is that it was an honest reaction to a reflection of what he's doing. He literally, on a day-to-day basis, is assaulting the climate. And so, you know, to a certain extent, thank you for your honesty, because there is no way that we would ever meet these non-binding commitments given his behavior of what's happening. So it was an honest delivery. And, you know, from a U.S. citizen perspective, it plays completely to his base, as Chris was saying.
And let's turn a bit to global leadership on this issue. Like, how should the world respond to this? Many European leaders have responded by signing a joint letter. New French President Emmanuel Macron went as far to actually, in a very humorous way, criticize Donald Trump. But the UK Prime Minister refused to call him up on that. Claire, what do you think? Why are the UK not taking a stronger lead on something that they actually believe that the UK position is that we actually have to stay in the Paris Agreement to tackle climate change?
Well, we've just had an election here last night, and luckily the May is fatally wounded. I don't think she'll last long now. The position, I think, was that you had to have trade deals first. We needed the UK needed to get higher in the queue to negotiate a new trade deal if we had a hard Brexit. I think everything's up for grabs now. We're not going to probably have a hard Brexit. We're not now looking at such hardliners necessarily being in charge of the Brexit negotiations, but we've yet to see which ministers get elected, and they have managed to form a government. So it's too early to tell, really. But I think at the time last week, it was as much around trade negotiations as anything else. The issue for the global leadership, I mean, this has put climate change back on the top set of issues for the geopolitical discussions, and that's good news. We needed that. Post-Paris, there was a sense of we've done what we needed to do, but actually the only way we're going to get an increase in ambition by 2020, which is what we need, is if this stays as the top issue on everyone's agenda. There's a great opportunity coming up with the G20, talking about, you know, the businesses, what can they do? How can they make sure that the action that they've committed to do under things like the We Mean Business Coalition and so on, how can we make sure that that's visible to the public? We need climate disclosure in the financial sector. We need businesses that are taking action being able to demonstrate that to their shareholders in ways that are meaningful and ways that are comparable between business. And we have this task force on climate-related risk disclosure that's being put to the G20, as I understand it. If the G20 was to agree that would immediately give all of those actors within the US a place to lodge there and reflect the action that they're taking in a way that is, you know, comparable globally. So there's a lot we can do right now, the rest of the world can do, that can enable the bottom-up leadership that we're seeing within the US by businesses, by states, by cities. And we need to do that. We need to do everything we can right now to keep that focus on the 2020 increase in ambition. We were talking earlier about Paris being voluntary. Basically, the set of agreements that were made aren't quite enough. We need everyone to do a little bit more. And luckily, what Trump has inspired is a movement that quite possibly could deliver that more.
I think the movement is a good point. I guess if you were looking at the positive from the Paris, one could look at how far we have come. Is the response to actually Trump pulling out. I mean, there was the #1 news story dominating the UK, and I'm sure in the US as well. And it came ahead of everything else. Does it really show, also with business taking a bigger lead than they have done before, how far and how much unity there is around tackling climate change?
Yeah.
I think that's true. Can I just jump in here real quick,
Sure.
Anders? Build on sort of the importance and the role of businesses in this fight to transition to the low carbon economy. I think, you know, to Claire's point, companies are taking action within their businesses, and companies to reduce their impact are investing in creating efficiencies in the supply chain. And I think it is critically important that companies align their lobbying and government affairs work with their internal commitment on climate change. I think we've seen a number of companies speaking out publicly about the withdrawal, and I think that's important and it's a good sign. But all of our companies and businesses, many of them, have lobbyists and have government affairs shops, and that are talking to policymakers day in and day out, both within Washington and also in state capitals around the country here in the US. I think it's critically important that companies move beyond lobbying on sort of issues that are, you know, like tax policy and trade policy, and really be willing to expend political capital to push policymakers on climate change. So I think now more than ever, it's critically important that we align this sort of internal commitment to reduce the footprint of our businesses with policy work to continue to make the case for policies that speed the transition to the low carbon economy.
Claire, I think you had a point on this as well. You were about to come in.
Well, no, I completely agree with everything that Chris just said. It's a challenging time, but it's a very interesting time. The opportunity for us to go beyond the single statements by nation governments. You know, Paris is all about transparency. It's about we need a bottom-up movement to push governments to do more. We need the poorest countries to be putting climate as the first thing that their prime ministers talk about when they're discussing a trade deal. You know, it's everything that Chris was just saying is true at the national level as well. But we also have an opportunity. I mean, there was in the negotiations around Paris and the leading up to Paris, it was all about the developing world will do more if you know, we'll join in. We'll be part. This will be a universal venture if we're given climate finance. Post-Trump withdrawing, the African countries were saying, we'll roll up our sleeves, we're going to do it anyway. India and China were saying, we'll go beyond our current targets. You know, the laggards have all moved forward, and those that didn't feel that they were capable of doing this on their own have said, look, we're going to do it on our own anyway. So there's this huge reassertion of commitment. And we just need to get young people involved in this as well. We need this to be truly a bottom-up movement.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in there for the movement. I think, you know, what Chris and Clare are saying is that you have, you know, countries that are stepping up and businesses that are stepping up. And I think in the US, what we're seeing, and please, Ben, add on to this too, is that we're seeing in the populace here, people who've never cared about this issue step up. And it's because there's this incredible fire in everybody's belly right now that if you attack immigration, if you attack civil rights, if you make assaults on the economy, and if you make it on climate, everybody is riled up to stand up for each other to a certain extent here. And so you have the movement spinning, in a way where it is actually accumulating tons of people who feel this resistance and this need to resist, and this understanding that if there is an attack on one of our issues, it is an attack on all of our issues. And I think that that is the stunning part of the movement right now in the US. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we had our climate march, and there was 200,000 people who poured on the street. Not as big as the Women's March a couple of months before, but certainly a lot of those people who were energized by the Women's March came to the Science March and then came to the Climate March. And so there's this, who went to the airports to defend against all the immigration attacks. And so generally you have that, and that type of movement is absolutely tremendous to see right now in the US.
Absolutely. So I think we're coming towards the end of this fascinating discussion. If I can get each of you just to do a conclusion and a roundup and saying, what are your organization's priority now, and how are you gonna move this forward, and how are you gonna tackle it moving forward in the rest of the year and the years to come?
So I'm happy to start. Well, the United States has become a rogue country on climate right now because of our leadership. But the reality is that the American people actually want to see climate action. And our focus for the next 2 years is basically to build as strong a climate movement as possible before the 2018 elections, to really change the political reality here in the United States, and to slow down, stop, fight as many of the rollbacks that the Trump administration is making on positive policies, and keep as many fossil fuels in the ground. And so we'll be resisting basically everywhere that we can.
Chris, what are Ben and Jared's role? How are they going to tackle this going forward?
So I think 3 ways. One is we need to remain focused on reducing the overall impact of our business. But there's only so much that we can do as an individual company. So the second thing we need to do is to really continue to step up and engage on the policy debate and advocate for policies at the national, regional, local level. Working both as Ben and Jerry's, but also working to bring other businesses into that. And then I think the third thing we will continue to do is to support the building of a vibrant, strong, citizen-led group of folks who are willing to, when necessary, get in the streets on this issue. Groups like Friends of the Earth and the great work that Center for Biological Diversity does, 350, Greenpeace, others. We want to continue to use our platform to help our fans and consumers become part of these movements. So we're gonna keep working hard in all 3 of those areas.
And yeah, John, can I have you come in as well there?
Sure. So I think we will be working on 3 different fronts as well. The first is really on the federal level and being a hawk and trying to, as Ben was saying, stop, delay, and keep resisting the different federal assaults that keep happening on our climate. So that's 1. 2, I think we will be a hawk and a true kind of action pusher for subnational actors that are state and regional governments, and especially in California, who are taking the mantle for the hero right now, the Hero Award. We are going to be hawkish and continue our work to stop fossil fuel extraction in California in particular. And then third, we are extremely excited to get the organizing on, and not only within the US, but with our allies So happy to be on this call with Claire too, and just have the globe. It's a time for global citizenship to actually have some meaning, and I think that we live in such an incredible time to do that right now.
Claire, are you obviously gonna stress the global role in this going forward? Is that correct?
Yeah, so our focus over the coming couple of years will be building the least developed countries' voice at the negotiations to ensure that we get as strong a set of rules as we can for Paris, supporting the poorest countries as the most vulnerable countries in their climate diplomacy, so helping them influence the rest of the world and thinking about what more they can do. And then finally, with a real issue around the climate finance not being sufficient. We're going to push for more climate finance, but we're also going to really push for every penny that we do get as climate finance to be used as effectively as possible. We have to really push up the quality of the remaining finance that's available and really focus it down on things that make the biggest difference for the poorest people.
Thank you all very much for taking part, and I'm sure this debate will carry on and is something we will keep following on in Greener Life, Greener World.